Hey everyone, I debated on making this video, but I feel like I need to give everyone a follow-up on the books I read, how the vote went. It was aired live, so some of you may have actually seen the vote. I debated on doing this because I got a lot of pushback from this. I have been accused of trying to ban books. My character has been attacked. A lot of very hurtful things. And so I debated on whether or not to do this. I even debated on whether or not to pull out of the committee or not. However, I didn't pull out. I feel that someone should be on these committees, whether to keep the books or to protect the children, either way. I do want to preface it by saying that I in no way, shape, or form think that any books should be banned. They should be available to anyone and everyone who wants to read them. If parents want their kids to read certain books, those books should be available. Sorry about that. And that's just a house by house personal preference. And so what this committee was doing had nothing to do with what would be available in the library systems in this country, what would be available online or in bookstores. It was none of that. It is just simply, should these books be available to children in their school system without parent consent? And some of these books require parent consent already. There's a glare on my glasses, I'm gonna take that off. Require parent consent. I'm a little iffy on the policy and I'm gonna have to look it up. I don't know if the parental consent comes before they check the book out, or if parents just have access to see what their kids are checking out. So I can't speak on that because I don't know and I haven't done the research on it. So all that being said, I do not want to ban books. A lot of my favorite books are banned books. I stand behind every last one of these books that I read. I learned a ton from them. And okay, so let's just get into it. So the first book was Beloved. If you have not read this book, you should read this. I wholeheartedly feel that every single person should read this book. It's about a former slave and her life after being free from slavery. There's a lot of hurt and rawness. They do use the N-word in this book, so just so you're aware before you start reading it. This book was actually on one of the lists for Mason and I to read together in his American literature class, and I had not read it before, but I'm glad I did read it. And I will be using the audiobook. I will not be reading this aloud to him. I will be using the audiobook to read it because there are some tough parts in it, and I feel like the author does an amazing job at reading this book and displaying emotions. And so we will work through that together in his American Lit class. So how the vote went on this is that 8 people voted to keep it in grades 9 through 12. 1 person voted just to keep it through all age groups. So the recommendation that the board is taking to our superintendent is that it remains in the grades 9 through 12 circulation. Now, we voted on what we would recommend, or we voted on what we wanted. Then the board took that vote, tallied the votes, came up with a recommendation, and they're gonna present it to the superintendent, and he will have the final say in whether these books stay or go. So this was just what our recommendation is. So that's Beloved. If you have not read that book, please take the time to read it. I mean, get the audiobook. It is not a book that you will regret reading. Okay, the next book, Clockwork Princess. It is actually, it says that it's number 3 in a series, but this series is the prequel to a series that has 5 books in it. So it is number 8 in the whole series. And there were 2 parts in it that insinuated sexual activity. However, there were no details or anything. The only complaint that I have about this book is that it's the 8th book in the series, and now I know how the series ends. So I'm kind of disappointed that I didn't read this series ahead of time. If you're wondering, it's The Mortal Instruments is the first 5, and then The Infernal Devices is the last 3. I don't know if you can see that. But it is basically, there's a love story thrown in there. There's, it's action-packed. So this is a book that I would definitely let my children read. And I think that, I mean, I have middle school and up, and I think they're all mature enough to handle this book. So the way the vote went, one person voted to keep it on all age groups, 5 people, grades 6 to 8 and 9 to 12, and then 2 just 9 to 12. It is going to be recommended for middle and high school. All right, so the next book, Eleanor and Park. This is another book that if you have not read it, you need to take the time to read it. There's a lot of things in here that are presented in a way that is easy for children to understand. It's easy for young adults to understand, but it touches on bullying, insecurities with your weight and your race. It touches on abuse in the home, domestic violence. There is so much in this book that you can take away from it. And because of some of the parts for sexual content, I would not want my middle school girls reading it. I wouldn't even want Eli reading it. It's not a book he would pick up. But once they hit high school and they have those couple extra years to mature, I think it's 100% fine for them to read. This book is actually available in Mila's middle school, so I'm assuming it's available in other middle schools in the district. However, the librarian there said that she would be willing to look and see if it's actually one that needs to remain. That's neither here nor there, whether they pull it from her middle school or not. Mila is mature. It's just not a book that I would pick for her to read. The votes went 3 to keep across all and 6 to keep in grades 9 through 12. So it's going to be recommended that Berkeley County keep it in the high school libraries. And I 100% agree with that. Okay. The next book that I read was Looking for Alaska. I've read this book before and I absolutely loved it. I can't remember if it was Hulu or Netflix. I want to say it was Hulu. They have like a mini series. So this book is over like 11 or 12 episodes. And Tony and I watched it together and it was really great. We both enjoyed that. And so reading this again, there weren't many things that I was shocked about in Looking for Alaska. The sexual content is a little more in depth than say Eleanor and Park, but it's still not anything that is super, super graphic. So this touches on not fitting in at your school, being able to find new friends, being independent and learning how to manage your time. It also talks about drunk driving and what it looks like whenever you lose a friend, especially as a young person. And so there are also a lot of things in this book that I feel like kids could benefit from And a lot of them may have even experienced these things, and so it's very relatable to them. And that just gives, you know, when a child feels alone and they find something that they can relate to, it can really make a difference in decisions that they make in their life. So I definitely love this book. It is by John Green. 7 people voted to keep it across all the schools and 2 9 through 12. So it is being recommended to keep in every age level. I'm assuming that they won't put it in an elementary library because of just the reading level, but there are some elementary school kids who could absolutely read this book. But it is recommended to be kept throughout the entire county. So the next book is Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl. Jesse Andrews is the author. This is one of the first books that I read, and it definitely has good points in it. It's told from the viewpoint of a 17-year-old boy, and so there are a lot of sexual innuendos. The cuss words are ridiculously overboard. They use the F word almost 100 times in this book. They use the P word. This book has 300 pages in it. And so, considering the number of pages to the number of cuss words, it's a lot. And as I'm reading through it, I would definitely not even play this audiobook in the car with my 17-year-old. You can get your point across without using the amount of cuss words that are in this book, even though it's told from the point of view of a 17-year-old. I'm not naive. I was 17 at one point. I have a 23-year-old. I have a 17-year-old, and I have 3 in middle school. And to think that none of them use any of this language is absolutely absurd as a parent. And there's no need for me to lie to myself about it. However, I don't feel like it's necessary to speak that way so consistently throughout the entire book. I would not let any of my kids read this book. Now, Mason's 17. He's reaching an age where he picks and chooses some of his books on his own. I wouldn't stop him. I just would not recommend it for him. So the votes were 4 to keep all across, which I find absolutely crazy. No middle schooler needs to read a book with over 300 cuss words in it. I digress. 3 voted to keep it in grades 9 through 12. 1 voted for it to remain in grades 11 through 12, and 1 person voted to remove it. So because there was such a divide in the vote on this book, there isn't going to be a recommendation made on this book. They are just going to report the actual votes, and the superintendent is going to make the decision based on those votes. Okay, next book, Push. This novel is absolutely amazing. There's so much in this book that just breaks my heart. If you don't know what it's about a girl who is sexually assaulted in her home. She gets pregnant twice, and she's abused by her mother. If anyone has seen the movie Precious, that's what that movie is based off of, this book. It's very moving, and I do think that every parent in the world, in this country, should definitely read this book. I don't know what to say about it. Words cannot explain how heartbreaking it is, how moving it is, how eye-opening it is, and how lucky and blessed I am to have grown up in the house that I grew up in, because I do know that things like this happen on a regular basis. However, the language is very graphic. It's very disturbing. It's very blunt in how it says things. And I think that this is an adult level book and no one underage should be reading it. That's my opinion. So one person voted to keep it across all levels. 3 voted for 11th grade and 12th grade. 4 voted for 9th through 12th, and 1 voted to remove. So again, with this, because there was such a divide in the votes, they are just going to report the votes and not report a recommendation. But like I said, that book is extremely moving, and I will probably read it again. So the next book is Queen of Shadows. Again, this is book 4 in a series of 4, and it was very hard to get into because you have to know a lot of the backstory to be able to understand the story in this book. So I do feel gypped in the fact that I didn't get to read the first 3 books to fully understand this book. There are some sexual scenes in it. It's a little more graphic than, say, Clockwork Princess. It's probably right on par there with Looking for Alaska. It's a good fantasy book, and I probably would have enjoyed it more had I read the rest of the series. So 7 people voted to keep it across all library systems, or across all library ages, and 2 voted to keep it for 9 through 12. So it is going to be recommended to be kept in all the libraries. All right, next book, Sold. I read this one before, and I really enjoyed reading it again. It's another one of those books that is moving. It does have sexual innuendos. There's nothing graphic. The language in this book is not bad. This is one that if the girls had wanted to read it in upper elementary, I would not stop them from reading it. It is about a young girl who was sold by her stepfather into sex slavery. She was sold to a brothel. I feel that this is a conversation that we should be having with our kids, that sex trafficking is real. We should be having these conversations with them, boys and girls, from as early as they can understand. The U.S. is one of the #1 countries in the world for sex trafficking. It is a very real thing. And so by the time they get to the maturity level of where they would be picking a book like Sold, these are not new concepts. It's not a new topic to discuss. It's nothing that you would have to sit your kids down and talk about. These are discussions that you should be having in the car on the way to Walmart, because they need to be very vigilant in who they talk to, who's approaching them, paying attention to their surroundings. I mean, these are everyday conversations. There are some scenes in there that are heartbreaking, and they would want to discuss those with you. However, I don't think that they are so far over the top that kids upper elementary could not handle it. So 6 voted to keep it across all age levels, 2 in grades 9 through 12, and 1 voted for middle school and high school. So the vote is to keep it, or the recommendation is going to be to keep it. So the next book is Unravel Me. This book was a lot of fun to read. It is #2 in a series of 11 books. So I will probably work my way through these books. It's not a book that I would normally pick up on my own. However, I really, really enjoyed this. It is about a girl who has a condition where she cannot be touched. If you touch her, you die. And she has found out that there are 2 people in her life that actually can touch her. And there's also, uprising and war and fighting against the bad guy and all kinds of action in this book. I don't want to give too much away. This is a really good book. I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to my kids. So 5 recommended to keep it, 2 recommended for ages or grades 9 through 12. And so the recommendation is going to be to keep the book in all library systems. All right, so the last one is Wicked. When I found out that this was in the box, I think I put it in the first video, I was super excited because this is not a book that I would normally pick up for myself, but every time I see like advertisements for the Broadway show, I'm like, that's one that I would want to watch. That's a book that I would want to read. However, honestly, I don't do a lot of reading anymore like I used to. My life is so busy, I just really don't have time to. This challenge did force me to sit down and read, and I'm super thankful for that. So Wicked. This is about the Wicked Witch of the West, and it's her origin story. So it starts literally from her birth, and it goes all the way until Dorothy's house lands on her sister, and then her response to Dorothy's house landing on her sister. So this book has so many incredible storylines in it. It talks about Elphaba, that is the Wicked Witch of the West, how she adapts to having green skin, how her parents handle it. It talks about her making friends at boarding school, learning her strengths, her weaknesses. She is a humanitarian in this book because animals are personified, like the Cowardly Lion, and the Wizard of Oz is wanting to take their rights away, and she is fighting for these people. And she essentially is not a bad guy. She does not turn into the Wicked Witch until the house, Dorothy's house, lands on her sister, and Glinda, who was her roommate at boarding school, takes the shoes off of her sister and gives them to Dorothy. And Elphaba was promised those shoes by her sister, and so she wants her shoes back. In the process, the Wizard of Oz is wanting to get revenge on Elphaba because she is fighting against him. And so in order for Dorothy to go home, the Wizard of Oz has instructed her that she has to kill the Wicked Witch. I think anyone would turn into the evil person if they had to defend their life. So those are all of the amazing things. I felt my attitude towards the Wicked Witch change. I see her in a completely different light, and I want to sit down and watch The Wizard of Oz with Elphaba's backstory. However, I would not let any of my kids read this book, and I'm sure the Broadway play is different, but I would have to watch it before I would even consider letting my kids watch it. There is so much graphic sexual content, and it's not innocent stuff. It's almost like 50 Shades of Grey or worse level stuff in this book, and it is 100% inappropriate. My mom described it as erotica, and that's basically what it is. And I was so taken back by the fact that this book was allowed in schools, and I was wondering if anyone had even read it before they bought it or if they just read a description of it. So, I mean, I'm not going to tell a parent what they should and shouldn't allow their kids to read. I just don't think it should be so readily available in the schools that a child could check it out at the library, and then a parent may never know that their child has checked it out. If it stays in their book bag, if they don't pull it out, anything like that. And if parents are unaware that they are allowed to look and see, or they have the access to see what their children are checking out at the libraries, this is one that could definitely slip through the cracks that is very, very, very graphic. If you want some of the quotes in this book that are graphic, I can send those to you. So the vote on this, 1 to keep, 7 ages 9 through 12, and 1 to be removed. So it is going to be recommended by the board to the superintendent to remain in grades 9 through 12. So that is all the books. This was a very interesting experience for me. I got something out of every single book, and I am glad that I read every single book. I just don't agree that a few of them, 3 in particular, should be available to children, even young adults. I do realize that some kids are more mature than others. They can handle that stuff. Their upbringing in their home, their background, all of that stuff plays into literature that is read. That is why I would never want books to be removed from the public library system, from bookstores, anything like that. But basically those are the books I read. Those are how the votes went down. That's my opinion on some of these books. So again, I've already gotten the mean comment. So if you disagree with me, that's fine. We all have a right to feel the way we feel. I just ask that you please refrain from negative comments to me, because trust me, I've heard them all. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this. If you have any more questions about these books or anything like that, just let me know.